So good morning, everyone, and thank you all for being here. I don't think I have to do much of an introduction. I'm your deacon, Chip Tucker, and talked to Joe about a series of forums, and he said, well, you are involved with the Maryland Episcopal Public Policy Network. What about a discussion of the church and advocacy? And, should the church be involved with advocacy? I said, sure, I can put something together for that. So that's what today is about. And unfortunately, I haven't been part of any of the other forums because I've been at All Saints doing some things, serving there. There may be some things that I talk about today that you may have already heard. We'll see. So just as far as the layout, I'm going to start out by talking about the various ways that we work for the common good, both as individuals and as congregations. And then talk about a little bit about the historic engagement of the church in public life. And then a couple of theological principles that lead to the church being involved in civil engagement, and more specifically about the environment. And then talk about some practical ways a church can influence environmental policy. So I'll talk in general about advocacy, but then also, because the series is more about care for the environment, that's where we'll focus on. Ask questions at any time. If you've got a question, just speak up, raise your hand. And I do hope that we get into just an open discussion at the end of, what do you think about all of this? So we'll see how that goes. So when we talk about an individual's or a church's work for the common good, kind of split it up in some different areas. Charity, service, then advocacy and justice. And really advocacy and justice we'll kind of talk about together. So those are different ways that we can be involved in working for the common good. And I'm not putting any value judgments on them. They are all important, but they're just different. So we're talking about charity. Charity is it's giving money. Come on in. Charity is pretty straightforward. Donating things or money to an organization. It's really simple to do. It's something you can do from a distance. I mean, in this day and age, you can do it right from your home. If you find an organization that you look as doing some good work in the world and you think they're worthwhile, you can just go on and with a few clicks, you've donated money to them. And there can be a sense of immediate gratification of that, of I have given to this organization that's doing good work. And there are tons of organizations that are out there that are more than happy to receive donations from you. In fact, they're so happy, you'll probably hear from them in a quarter or a year later because they said, hey, you remember when you gave before? I'm sure you'd want to give again. And it focuses on a problem that might be near and dear to your heart. Most all people who are members of church give to charity, and parishes also as part of like an outreach budget. And then there's service. With service, you're giving more of your time and your gifts, your talent. And in getting involved with service, you might then be a little bit closer to who you're serving. You might meet people that you are serving. And as part of that, it can be very transformational. You are giving, but you end up receiving a lot yourself when you get involved with various service projects. So it takes more of your time. It's not immediate. It takes more of an investment. And it's focused a lot on people. And a lot of churches sponsor service events, and a lot of people individually do service. Then we get to advocacy and justice. With advocacy and justice, there's a little bit more of a risk in getting involved. You are out there, out in public, coming from a position of faith, and I think it requires a pretty firm foundation of faith in order to do this. And when you start getting involved with advocacy, in some ways you see more about how the world works, and it could change sort of your outlook. And it's not something that you could do on your own. I mean, you can, but to be effective, you need to network with others. So find other people who are interested in whatever the topic is, or find organizations and work with them and network with others. And this is focused more on people's rights, or it focuses on systems that are in place that aren't quite working right, that lead to potential injustices. So I've got a couple of examples. If we're talking about criminal justice, just as an example, charity for criminal justice, you could give to Kairos Ministry. This happens to be one that I'm involved in. And it's very simple. You can go online and you can donate to them, and they'll go take it and do all kinds of good work. Hey, Susan. If you're doing service in criminal justice, that could be serving on a Kairos team, where you go inside to the prisons. You meet the inmates that are there, and you minister to them directly where they are in their place. But if you do an advocacy work, then you might be working to potentially reform the criminal justice system. Why does the United States have so many who are incarcerated? And if you look at other countries, we have a very high percentage of our population who are incarcerated. And there may be systems in place that want that to be for certain reasons. So working to change that is at a kind of a higher level. Example from a creation care standpoint, charity. You could donate to Interfaith Partners of the Chesapeake. They'll gladly take your money and work on different projects that are going on around the state to help the Chesapeake Bay. If you're involved in service, you might participate in a river cleanup and get involved with others who share your concerns with the state of the environment and work to clean things up. Advocacy might look like supporting legislation that would incentivize clean energy. And if you happen to look in the news now, there are others who are working against clean energy. And so that's a tough battle. But that's just an example of, and there are tons of different examples of what you could do. But just to give you an idea of the differences and the levels that you're working with this. Okay, so but if you look at throughout history, the church has been involved in civics. There's roles in social movements like the civil rights movement, or more current, the sanctuary movement, where the church is trying to help out immigrants. And the church provides some moral and ethical guidance. So for example, a concept like the sanctity of life, which gets involved with things like abortion, or capital punishment, or euthanasia, mercy killing, dying with dignity, those kinds of things. And the church has weighed in over the years on those things. And then racism, poverty, inequality, to highlight things where things are just not quite right in society. And the church has done a ton over the years for the commitment to the common good. Hunger relief, so food banks, shelters for the homeless, shelters for the battered, shelters for orphans. One thing that we tend to think about is when people need help, what is the government organization that will help them? But if you go back decades, it wasn't the government that'd be doing that, it was the church. The church sponsors hospitals, they sponsor schools and all of that. The church did a lot of that. So the church over time has been involved with society's issues. So basically, and not just the Christian faith, but other Christian faiths emphasize justice and compassion and try to guide the community's actions. So yeah, acting as like a moral compass in society, basically. And if you look in the Bible for what it might say about civic engagement, just a couple of things here. From the Gospel of Matthew, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. Let your light shine before others. They may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. Don't take your light and hide it under a bucket. Let it shine. Be out there in the world. And from Proverbs, from a standpoint of promoting justice, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and fairly judge. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy. Any questions at this point? Okay. You have probably heard a number of these from other forums, but basically within Scripture, we look at the story of Genesis and how we are children of God and we are the caretakers of God's creation. This has been interpreted as, since we have dominion, it's ours to use and abuse, and that's really not what it means. We are caretakers. We're responsible for the health and well-being of the creation. I read in one book, it was kind of a neat little just statement of, yes, we are children of God, and Mother Nature is waiting for us to act like it. And I said, oh, that's actually pretty good. I like that. Yeah, so stewardship. I mean, we're in the season of stewardship now. Stewardship is a core value that we need to take care of whatever we have, whatever we own, but it also extends to creation. And you know, the human race has gotten to a point where what we do impacts the earth. Right? We've heard all about that. And we have to be responsible to manage. And yes, the earth can be a resource, but we have to be very careful with that. And the church plays a part in all of that. And working for the environment is more than just clean water for the sake of clean water and clean air and making the earth beautiful. There is a justice aspect to working for the environment also. There are a number of communities that are impacted by pollution. So, you know, you've heard the term "not in my backyard." So whenever we put up a plant or whatever, where's it going to go? Where it's going to go to an unattractive part of the community. So if you happen to live there, people who live there either because that's where they're raised or that's where they can afford to live. And so if it affects their water, if it affects the air they breathe, it affects their physical health. It affects their mental health. So they're not as productive in the workforce. Their children can't do well in schools. They have to pay more for health care because they're sick more often. And they can't afford to pay for the health care. It's a cascading effect. And so any degradation to the environment impacts those who are marginalized and those who are poor more than those who have money and can deal with it. So there's very much a justice aspect in working for the environment. It's not just for the sake of we want pretty gardens everywhere. So if somebody or if a parish wanted to do something for the sake of environmental policy for advocacy. There are various things that people can do. And on one level, you can contact your local representatives. If there are certain things that you look at and say something is not quite right, you can let your representative know, and it's something that maybe they can work on. If you know that there is some legislation, either good or bad, you can contact your representative to say, I really support this and I hope you support it too, or I don't support this and I hope you would vote against this and here's why. Representatives do listen to their constituents, and so they do take it. And when they hear your voice, there's also a question of, is this one voice? Are they representing a group? Are they representing a few groups together? But anyway, your voice does matter, and you can contact local representatives. Which brings us to another point. Mother Nature does not have a voice. Mother Nature does not have a vote, which is why it needs people to advocate for its health. And you can also partner with environmental organizations. A lot of organizations have already done what I'll say the hard part. They know what the issues are. They know what legislation is coming. They may have even helped to craft some of the legislation. And if you go on the websites of some of these organizations, they will tell you, these are our priorities. And these are some things coming. This is what we promote that you should support. And they'll even go as far to say, contact your representatives, and here's what you want to tell them. They've already got it written out. You add your name and you add your representative's name, and it's all pre-done for you, so you can go do that. Another option is to participate in the Maryland Episcopal Public Policy Network. So that is something that I am involved with. Give you a little bit of a background. The Episcopal Church, the national church, has an Episcopal Policy Network. So they're working at the national level on things. I don't know how many years ago it was, but 15 to 20 years ago, Maryland decided to have its Episcopal Public Policy Network. Maryland might be unique in having an Episcopal Public Policy Network. This is not something that every diocese has. Maryland might be the only one in the country that has one of these. And so the Maryland Episcopal Public Policy Network works on the state level. So get to Meepen a little bit more here. But this is just stressing partnership with government organizations, partnership with civil organizations, Sierra Club, Interfaith Power and Light, any of those sorts of things, is really a great way to be a force multiplier. You can join your voice with them. It's really important to network, as I said earlier, in working with advocacy. So more on MEPA now. Like I say, we work on the state level, which means we are working with the Maryland General Assembly. And we've got folks from all over the diocese, and we're partnered too. We have a couple of members from the Episcopal Diocese of Washington. So the Episcopal Diocese of Washington includes counties from Maryland. So St. Mary's, Charles, Montgomery County. So we have some folks who are from there who are involved with social justice, who are part of MEPN. We also have representatives from the Lutherans. We've partnered with them, so we have a couple of Lutheran folks who participate also. And we partner with other advocacy groups. So I have contacts in Interfaith Power and Light, Interfaith Partners of the Chesapeake. We look at what Maryland League of Conservation Voters, what they're looking at doing. So they are aware of us, and they'll list us as partnering organizations, and we do the same. And we had a social justice day just a few weeks ago. We held it at St. Anne's in Annapolis, the seat of the government, and we had our partners join us for that. And then, we have gone to some of their events that they hold. And we're organized by topic. So if you look at like all of the various pieces of legislation, all the bills that Maryland General Assembly is considering, you can break them into various categories, like the environment, healthcare, education, criminal justice, and housing. And we have people that focus on those various areas. I focus on the environmental area. And part of the learning curve with this is just understanding how to work with the Maryland General Assembly website. You can go on there and find out all the legislation. It takes some getting used to. But that's where working with other organizations gets really helpful and important. Because you can go on the websites of some of these organizations, they'll tell you, these are the pieces of legislation that we are focusing on. One thing Interfaith Power and Light did, Interfaith Partners of Chesapeake did last year I thought was really great. They sent emails out to their members, and they said, these are all the things that we're thinking about. You tell us your top 3 as an individual. So I got to weigh in on the 3 that I was interested in, and they used that to come up with their top 3. And then once it gets to the season of the session, which starts in January, you find out more about when the committee meetings are, and there's a box you can just go on and check and say, I support this. Or you can send a letter to a representative. You can write a letter and provide written testimony for a bill, and it gets submitted. You can sign up to give oral testimony. Go to the committee meetings and speak. So those are all the different things that we do within MEPN, and I don't do this as a representative of St. James or my other parish, All Saints. I'm doing it on behalf of the diocese in a sense, but I have found it to be pretty amazing to be part of it and to see how our political system works. And I do want to say one point too about our political system in the state. Going to some of these committee meetings, and you hear, and you're in favor of this legislation. There was a bottle bill. I thought this bottle bill was great, and there's all kinds of great reasons. And then people spoke in opposition to it. Now a lot of them are the bottlers. Okay, they must be the bad people. But when you listen to their arguments, they have sound arguments for why not. But the whole process was civil. I want to let you all know that. Because what we see in the news is everybody's at each other's throats. It was very civil, and that was really good to see. Okay. That was all I pretty much had. So I do feel that the church has a role in public policy. Having said that, it's not for everybody. Some of us would be drawn to something like this. Some of us might say, yeah, you all go and do that. I'm going to go do something else. Really, that's the way it is for just about any ministry. But it's important for the church to have a voice. If the church does not have a voice in the public place, then others will have a voice. And the others, it could be corporations, lobbyists, and there may be some reasons why people say you are really way off base, but it comes from a standpoint of, I'm coming from what Jesus says. I'm following the gospel. And with what Jesus says, this is my position. That's the firm ground that I try to stand on, and all of us at MEPN try to stand on when we advocate. And it's critical to build partnerships as part of any kind of advocacy work, which takes some getting used to. For me, it took some getting used to, not just this is what I'm going to do, but okay, how do you organize with other organizations? That was all I had prepared. I would love to hear your all's thoughts on any of this. If you've had any experience with advocacy yourself, If you think, I think the church should just be the church and do their thing and stay out of that, say, separate from the state or anything like that. But I'd like to open up any thoughts that you have.
So I have the devil's argument, the devil's advocate question. So I've got some friends who work at a Catholic university and are going through some infertility issues. And one of the things that they are facing is that because they work at a Catholic university, the insurance that their employer provides does not cover any infertility treatment.
Okay.
If this view of churches and public policy is carried through, then you could have IVF made illegal because people are on religious grounds kind of moving into the realm of public policy. I'm sure that we can all think of other examples. Why then shouldn't we say, whether as citizens or as religious people, that churches should just stay out of policy?
So
I'll also just say, I agree with you that we should be, but I think this is a question that we got to answer.
No, it's a good point. So, for example, when I mentioned, the church has advocated for sanctity of life, and an example is abortion. Some churches you talk to will say abortion needs to be a choice for a woman. It may not be the best thing, but in some cases it may be the best thing, even though it's like the lesser of evils. And then some people say you should never have abortion. From the church, you will get different opinions on things.
The Episcopal Church in Sonoma is in favor of reproductive choice. Just so that.
Yes, yeah.
Just want to be clear. Yeah.
Well, because the argument is, if there is a threat to what your beliefs, your Christian beliefs, our Christian beliefs are, sometimes the only way to make a difference is through public policy. If you say, well, it reminds me of the awful poem called The Hangman. It says, first they came for the union members, but I was not a union member, so I said nothing. And then they came for the communists, but I was not a communist, and so I said nothing. And then they came for the Jews, but I was not a Jew, so I said nothing. And then they came for me, and I'm condensing the poem, and there was no one to speak. So I feel as though it's a strongly intrinsic Christian responsibility to take a stand on public issues, because that's where the injustices can often sprout and spread.
And it is really hard when you are trying to make a change to, I'll say, the status quo. This is the way the system is set up. This is the way the system's been operating. Those who tend to be in power don't want that to change. They want people to be happy. And really, when I say they want people to be happy, they really want people to be silent and passive and just go with it. Because if you start to say something's wrong, leadership can take that as a criticism. And we tend to think that we've got systems in place and there's been a lot of thought that's gone into them and they must be good. But sometimes those systems lead to injustices. They help out certain portions of the population and they hurt other portions of the population. And so that's where a church can come in and speak up. We have heard, those who have gone to Meepen and spoken, given oral testimony, especially when you go in with a collar on, have gotten responses back. Thank you. We needed to hear your voice. We needed to hear. We take it seriously. And yeah, it's important. But you will see people who have different opinions about legislation on topics. It's not clear cut. It's not easy. Even within Meepen, there was a bill and had to do with clean energy. And it was calling for a lot of clean energy initiatives, which is great. And then it got amended to say, where economically viable, where economically viable. And some people got really upset because, you've just taken all the teeth out of the bill when you do that. I can't support that. I was thinking, I actually kind of like that it says economically viable, because I don't want us to go off the deep end. We need to head in a certain direction. And yes, there is compromise you have to work with, but you got to make steps forward. But yeah, within MEPN, we'll have some different opinions on things.
Well, it's interesting that for public policy, it's the public, and the public has all different ideas. So when you're trying to create a policy that is for the public, you're going to run into all different opinions.
Yes.
So it makes it difficult to say, I believe what she believes, or I believe what he. And so where does it come in that there is a policy written that will take care of everybody's needs or wants? Like, does the Episcopal Church or the diocese have a list of public policies that they support or that they've written, or?
Well, you're getting into an interesting point with MEPN, because people have asked, well, does the bishop bless everything that you take a stand on, kind of thing? And to be honest, no. However, there are times where it's like, what stand are we going to take on this? We should go to the bishop. And there have been times the bishop said, you know what? I don't want to weigh in on this. I do not want to weigh in on this right now for whatever reason. But it's hard, but we talk about it, and we do, whenever we do a write-up for written testimony, it's not a little mini sermonette, but you need to get to the gospel. You need to come from a standpoint of faith. We're not coming at this because we think this is just simply a good idea, as any citizen would think it's a good idea, but it aligns with our faith. And that needs to be brought out and expressed in whatever we put forward.
So do any of the policies that are written have that in mind when they're writing it? When they're writing a policy, a public policy?
So we don't get involved with the writing of the policy, and that's where the other organizations come into play. An organization like Sierra Club, they're huge, and they have people who work to help craft some of the legislation.
I guess my point is, though, if the church doesn't give a policy based on what they believe to be right, somebody else who creates a policy that isn't of that same faith or idea is not going to necessarily write in that policy what you think to be right or should be followed.
Right.
And I know this is a problem. I know you can't write policies based on all religious interest or.
Right, and we don't write policy, I'll say, but we follow what's happening, and we lend our voice if it's something that makes a lot of sense or something that doesn't. And I hate to say it, but sometimes the devil is simply in the details. You see a title, the bills will have a title. The first thing is, do I like what that says or not? And then there's the elevator speech. It's this bill does this, so it's a little bit more of a write-up. And then, do you like that? Okay, that sounds good. And then you read the bill itself. Whew, pages and pages and pages and pages and pages. And honestly, if I get confused, if I can't really tell from looking at the bill, I might just say, no, I just can't. And sometimes there are parts of the bill, yes, this is great, and there's this other part of it, and all right, that's fine, I don't really care about that, but this is good. Yes, I can support this. But sometimes it's just, it means well. Hasn't been thought out maybe 100%, which then leads to amendments, which are hard to track. And that's where sometimes the compromise comes in. And you'll have this really good idea, and people are presenting it, and the opposition will say, well, what happens if, or what about? And if the answer comes back, well, we need to think about that more.
But are you talking about, like, does the church have positions? Maybe part of this is vocabulary, because I'm hearing that the Episcopal Church, and I've looked at some of these, has positions. So I think when I heard your question, I interpreted it as, is your organization referencing official Episcopalian positions in how you're doing your advocacy at the state level?
Yes and no. Sometimes. Sometimes we will, in our write-ups, we will reference, I'll say, a resolution from the national church. Sometimes they're resolutions, and we can reference those as some background. But not always. Not always.
And where are those position statements? I found a few of them, but is there like a central repository of where the Episcopal Church is housing the church's views on these?
Yeah, this would come under General Convention.
Yeah, so actually, I have a friend who used to work in the National Episcopal Public Policy Office in Washington, and in order to act on any issue, they had to have a resolution from General Convention. And so you look at General Convention, and it's, sometimes the General Convention meets every 3 years, and it's all the dioceses of the Episcopal Church, which includes like the church in Cuba, the church in Haiti, and stuff like that. And they have literally thousands of resolutions that they work through at those meetings. And a lot of the reason for that, it's like, who would disagree with this? Part of the reason for that is so that the public policy folks can point to this and say, no, look, we are speaking on behalf of this number of Episcopalians all over the world. I think that because we are an Episcopal church, kind of the guidance and the teaching authority of the bishop is another source of that. And I think because we're a church, the Holy Spirit working in the community as a whole is another source of authority for that.
Yes.
And so I think that all of those 3 sources, whether it's official movements of the Episcopal Church, whether it's the guidance of our own local bishop, whether it's like a groundswell of support coming from the people of the diocese who are active in the Maryland Episcopal Public Policy Network, we think that God is present and working in lots of different ways, and all of those are sources for the work that we do.
Right. And we have gotten a level of trust from the bishop. The bishop can say, yeah, go do great things. Our bishop is one who does not like resolutions like the national church does. She's like, don't bring me a bunch of resolutions. Just go. We don't have to make a resolution to say X, Y. Just go and do.
So I have my own question, and maybe it goes to Father Joe's devil's advocate. Because I really do value a separation of church and state. And so I think it goes to, and I do advocacy in my professional life. Like I work with the American Geophysical Union, and they have policy days. I'm a scientist on the Hill, and they'll give us training, and we'll be targeting certain bills. We'll go and talk to our representatives about as a group, and so it's very well organized, and like we're very targeted in the work we're trying to do. And that comes from a personal value that for some of the participants may be faith-based and may not be faith-based, right? And so I guess where I struggle with this question is whether, as Christians, we're coming to this work with a feeling of absolutism, which to me is where I find a tricky road. Because as you mentioned, when you're hearing testimony, and I've done this at the State House as well, like it raises really good points to tackle tricky problems, right? And so to me, the value is having all these voices at the table, raising different issues, and then these poor elected officials, I do feel sorry for them, have to figure out a way to solve it, right?
Yes.
But so I think that my question is like, some of the way you've presented it comes to me with a feeling of absolutism that makes me uncomfortable.
Okay.
And that's a personal journey for me of like figuring out how to navigate that, especially in these spaces that cross over to different spheres of life. And so I'm just curious about, on the one hand, you're saying you feel this generative spirit of solving problems with different opinions at the table. But then, yeah. So I'm turning myself in circles, which is where I am.
That's fine, because this is hard work, and there are no absolutes with it. But it's good that you're in the Episcopal Church, which tries to take the middle way. And it's funny because if you're speaking on behalf of something, well, you're either speaking on behalf of it or against it. It's one or the other, right? Well, so if someone is on the other side, what about them? And my philosophy is, love the people on the other side. They're not an enemy. They have their interests, and they may have some valid points too. But whatever a solution is, or whatever a legislation is, love all sides as part of the process. And even within a Christian group, you're going to find people who are going to have some different opinions. Some people are like, this is great. Some people will say, this isn't far enough. Others will say, I think this will cause more strife, which is not good. You're going to find all kinds of opinions on things. But to what extent we can, sometimes the message is, you're going to want to do this because it's cheaper, it's more expedient. You're really kicking a can down the road, and we can't afford to kick a can down the road. This is why it's so important for you to address this now. And yeah, you may not be popular with it, but there are a lot of people that agree that this needs to be addressed now, especially when you're talking about environmental issues. I don't know if that helped or not, but I understand where you're coming from, and I struggle with some of the things myself. And for looking at environmental this past year, there was a ton of bills. And number one, it's hard to focus on all of them. Thankfully, there are a few of us working on environmental, and we can sort of divvy them up and look. But there seems to be some that rise to the top of, okay, I think I can put support behind this one. This one, I don't know if I can really support it. And then two, it's not just a matter of supporting it because I think it's just simply a good idea, but from the standpoint of, is it helping further the kingdom of God? Is it something that aligns with what the gospel teaches? Okay, I can get behind that.
Listening to this, I think it would be fascinating for church to figure that out. Either a little handbook, not as big as day by day or something like that, but maybe even just a couple pages going around with your lobby, which sort of said, here are the environmental principles, and here's religious doctrine which bears upon them. Real quick, get each guy to how environmental policy links up with this stuff. I think it would be very helpful. My experience going around the Capitol Hill, they love little leave behind things that are short. The second thought I had was on the advocacy. Do you have someone within the Episcopal Church or outside it who is a friend of it who could be an advocate? Because having worked on legislation, the only ones I've seen go through are the ones who have big time advocates behind them, or the ones.
Oh, you mean, does the Episcopal Church have like lobbyists to me, that kind of a thing?
Well, I'm not sure. No. I'm talking about the congressman or the senator who's out of the appropriate committee or whatever it is. Get them to become an advocate for what you want to do.
Oh, wow.
Because unless you got one of those people who are in leadership positions in the House or the Senate, I don't know how it works, state level, but in national, you've got to have one of those if you want something to go through.
Right. And one of the disadvantages that we have is we're not part of the backroom conversations. And there are a number of those that happen. And the lobbyists for, big corporations, they've got people at the back rooms.
Yeah, well, when occasionally we've gotten people in the back room, the first thing we want to do is rush in and grab the pen. Because just a few edits can make a big difference. Like, it sounded like the one you said, if economically feasible, which is enough for everybody to say that, but that's the one not considered. But sometimes economic constituencies will be behind.
And you know, it's interesting when you talk about environmental things, there are some Christians who will say, well, if we're destroying the earth, well, that's bringing the end times. That's bringing Jesus sooner, isn't it? Don't we want that? I don't think so. I think we want to try to preserve our earth.
I think what you're saying is very valid, and I never worked on Capitol Hill, fortunately. But I think the big driver behind everything, and this sounds very shallow, is money. And I don't know how many members the Episcopal Church has nationally, but I can tell, I bet a kidney that the evangelicals, who are the ones who are not pro-environment, have a lot more, so they get heard more, and then the people who get elected listen to them more. And so I don't, in principle, I think this is a great idea. I just don't know how it would work.
You think we're outgunned, as it were? Or,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
I think it's important to note that we're not alone in this. One of the most compelling voices, and we heard a little bit of this last week, one of the most compelling Christian voices on the environment was Pope Francis.
Yes.
And Pope Leo seems to be following precisely in that regard. You talk about the number of evangelicals, there are quite a lot of Roman Catholics in the country. And on these issues, our understanding of Scripture, our understanding of how, like, our discipleship of Christ calls us to work both for the environment and for the communities that bear the brunt of environmental degradation. Dan Castillo talked last week about the cry of the earth, the cry of the poor being kind of one cry together. We are really working with the Roman Catholics on this. Another one of the most significant voices in this respect has been Patriarch Bartholomew of the Eastern Orthodox Christians. So when you think of Roman Catholics, when you think of Eastern Orthodox Christians, when you think of the 80 million Anglicans throughout the world, of which the Episcopal Church is a part, that's the vast majority of the world's Christians that are being led by people that have kind of foregrounded environmental issues as some of the most important moral challenges facing us today, precisely because they're tied in with our care for the poor and immigrant communities and things like that.
And there are Jewish groups and Muslim groups, same thing. They you know, promote environmental justice, environmental awareness also.
You know, it also may be that we're at a point where there may be possible to do some things.
Possible what, sorry?
To do some things. I mean, we had the Clean Air Act and all that kind of environmental legislation passed in the 1970s. I mean, our Congress actually worked on that part. It's national and miracle, but a lot behind it. Today, we're beginning to get to a point where people are seeing the impact of the environment. We kind of got it improved to a point where the rivers weren't on fire, you know, you could see down the street in Los Angeles, those kinds of things. But now, you know, we're getting terrible smoke during the summers here in the Chesapeake Bay. It comes from Canada. You know, if you look at a lot of data put out by NOAA, the economic costs of these, and costs of insurance companies, and costs on companies, the economic cost is very visible to people.
Yeah.
It's going up.
Yep.
And I think people are more likely to act on that than polar bears. I mean, polar bears are cute and all that sort of stuff, but when it starts hitting people's pockets in terms of their insurance premiums and those kinds of things, then they make it a lot more interesting. And the balance isn't as dramatic as I think. If you track Gallup polls over time, in terms of the importance of the environment, you can always track sort of up till you get to the point of concern, till you get to the point of the Clean Air Act and everything else. So we clean the whole list of stuff up and went down. But it didn't go down that far. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's in 40 to 50% range, whereas it used to be up to 60-something percent. So, you know, people are getting more and more concerned about the environment. It's come down and down. It's going to go back up. And so, in some sense, nature may have its own voice at the table, which is when all these environmental effects start coming home to roost, as they are.
you brought up a couple of things that were really interesting to me. So I did some training through an organization called Blessed Tomorrow. It's a faith-based organization, and they have this program called Blessed Tomorrow Ambassadors. I'm an ambassador. I needed to follow up on your email, but yeah, I'm one of the ambassadors. I did this a couple of years ago, and the Episcopal Church endorses this. But part of the training was, if you're talking to environmental concerns to people, don't talk about the polar ice caps melting so much. Talk about what you see in your neighborhoods and such. So I can talk to, flooding in downtown Annapolis is more and more common now. It used to be a rare event, and now it happens all the time. They had to do pumping for the boat show. So you have things like that happening. I've seen the Delaware Shore get eaten away. There's various things. You make it local. You make it local so people appreciate it. I also come from a position of hope, not of despair. And it can be very easy to have a sense of despair with all this, but I come from a sense of hope with it.
Well, and Catherine Mayo, she's a climate scientist who lives in Texas, and
Mhm.
her husband is an evangelical minister. So I think some of the statements about evangelicals it's not uniform. She's actually one of the guiding lights on faith and climate. She
Good.
has a huge following. She's authored several of the IPCC reports. And she has some great YouTubes I could share with us about precisely these sorts of communication approaches for how you get folks to call their representatives.
Right.
So just to nailing in on you can't be in the back rooms writing the legislature because the church doesn't do that. I just want to get or is that just a position of MPNN? Because that is the sausage making aspect of it. I'm just curious about where the line is. Is that a legal line? Is that a position line of the Maryland policy group? Or is that like an Episcopal church? I mean, what is
It could be a money line. I'm not 100% sure, and I can't speak for the National Episcopal Public Policy Network. Maybe they do more, but we work more with other organizations that have a little bit more of an inside track. So something like Maryland League of Conservation Voters or Sierra Club. And are they part of the back room? Well, they're helping craft legislation.
Yes.
So if you're helping craft legislation, that's where you're at the front end of it. And we do talk about within Maryland Episcopal Public Policy, how can we get more involved with the front end? But we don't. Some of it's manpower, it's time, it's what gifts and talents you have. But you really got to know what you're doing to craft legislation.
so part of it's the capacity of the
Some of it's that, yeah. And I wouldn't want to begin to be part of that. If there's a group doing it and I could sit in and listen and find out how some of it's done, I think that'd be great. But you look at some of these bills, and it's like, oh my gosh. It's, a lot of legalese. It's hard to decipher sometimes. A lot goes into them.
It's now 12:42.
Say again?
It's now 12:42. Time.
It's getting kind of late. Hey, okay, so we need to wrap up here soon. I do want to pose a question to you. So everything I've talked about is like an individual working with another organization or working with MEPN or something like that. I'm not advocating for this, but what do you all think of, if St. James had an advocacy group? Just, what does that sound like? What does that sound like to you? That was not something that I propose or anything like that, but just for the sake of conversation.
Well, even the environmental group that we're doing now,
Mhm.
the group that come out, that to me is almost a starting point. It's like to do an advocacy, it's like you got to know what you're doing, you got to jump into that. Whereas this is kind of like people doing the same thing. What's the top 3 things that are important to you?
Right.
Those things. So that group to me is a group that you could talk to and work advocacy.
Good.
But I don't know, I would not say that I would do that now, because I don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
This is how you do it. So,
And it takes some hand-holding to
yes,
get to know how to
yes.
do this. I just started just a couple years ago myself. And with the environmental group, we're focused, I talked about charity and action and advocacy. We're on the action side. That action is, I think, where we're focusing on with that. We haven't really talked about advocacy, but it's coming up as part of this. So just curious as your
Can I add
thoughts.
just one thing on the subject of the sort of the moral issue of getting into the sausage making of legislation? I feel like if we're grounded in faith and scripture, that there really isn't an issue there. The issue comes, I think, when it gets to making the deals where they say, all right, we'll back off of what we believe and not make a big deal of that if you'll do this for us. Hopefully, our faith puts us in a position where we do not make those kinds of compromises. And that what we fervently believe is backed by faith. Just the one current example is in the treatment of immigrants and the use of the vocabulary. Is it an immigrant? Is it a refugee? Is it a person seeking asylum, or is it illegal alien? Which, just in the very vocabulary, you've sort of made some kind of stand. And I think as long as we don't compromise and say, oh, okay, well, we'll say, maybe the South Americans don't deserve to come, but the Europeans do. As long as we don't back off of our commitment to our faith, I feel that we're on pretty safe ground.
There was a bill last year, it looked pretty good. It was environmental, and it got amended. And it got amended in such a way that it was really watered down, and we were going to support it. And then reading through the amendment, it's like, you know what? I just don't see why we would support this. It doesn't do that much anymore. And so it's almost like the opposition won. They got it watered down so much that it doesn't hurt them too much, and it's not. So we didn't support it. We didn't support it.
Did it pass?
I can't remember.
Okay.
I can't remember. I stopped taking I took my eye off it. I don't remember if that one passed or not. And the other thing with did it pass or not? Some of these you have to be really persistent. You have to take a long-term approach. A lot of bills that you support, they come year after year after year, and you measure progress by, did it make it out of the committee or not? Oh, it made it out of committee, and then did it cross over from the House to the Senate? Sometimes it takes steps, and that's years. And it's hard. It's hard when you want something to change. It's a worthy fight.
I just answered your question. I guess I would be concerned about St. James starting an advocacy effort. What I was talking about was just because my experience was at the federal level.
Yeah.
Like it could be part of the cog that feeds into it, either by the good works we're doing here, or that sort of thing, or following, or volunteer good people like you to help out with this advocacy effort.
Yeah, I would look at it.
Like that, a slower level would be more reasonable.
I look at it as if there were something like a St. James thing. Maybe that's working at a county level. If it wanted to work at a state level, you might as well join up with Maryland Episcopal Public Policy Network and get involved with that. But yeah, I don't know. Anything else? Well, thank you all. Thank you all. I'm sorry I had to miss the other ones, so I hope those are all cool. Jerry Weingrad, I would love to have heard him. I bet he was good.
They're all about the spirit.